Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Motivational speaker, coach, God lover, and goal crusher Joe Rivera brings you inspiring leaders, incredible stories, and valuable lessons on how you can change, grow, and reforge your life. Now, here's your host, Joe Rivera.
What's up, what's up, what's up, what's up, what's up? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Reforge Your Life Show. I'm your host, Joe Rivera. Here at Reforge Your Life Show, we show that comebacks are more than possible. And today, I'm honored to bring on my next guest. She's a rock star. She's an author, a keynote speaker, and a former CEO and founder of some cool hardware stores. Gina Schaefer, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you, Joe. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a little while. But it's always great energy when we get together and able to have that conversation. So I'm looking forward to it also. Man, you got a really great story, and I've heard it. The audience hasn't heard it. I can't tell it the way you can. Nobody can. So I'd love for you to share that and share a little bit about yourself here to the audience.
Yeah, I'm never sure where to start. Like, I feel like I could start in elementary school when you talk about our stories, right? Let me try and make it more exciting and briefer than that. I moved to Washington, D.C. after college. So I've been here for a long time. I've lived in D.C. now longer. Go Commanders.
Oh, boy. Here we go. You guys lost yesterday, though, man. Go Birds.
I had to sneak it in. I've been a Commanders fan since the minute I moved to DC, which is great. So I have to represent a little bit. But I moved here and I was working for a nonprofit, a really cool nonprofit organization. Long story short, I left that, moved to Brazil for a year, came back, got into the tech field, the boom and bust of the technology industry in the mid-90s, and I got laid off 3 times. And the third time I got laid off, I was like fed up to here. I said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Clearly, I'm not cut out to be in the technology field. What do I want to do? And I had moved to this really cool neighborhood in the middle of Washington, D.C. called Logan Circle. Logan Circle had been one of the neighborhoods in the United States that had unfortunately been destroyed by the riots when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Now, I think that was before I was born, maybe probably before you were born too.
Yes.
But it was this beautiful neighborhood that just kind of fell apart. And around the time that I got laid off the third time, I had moved to that neighborhood because I really wanted to buy my own place and it was cheap. So people were moving back and, we were finding these beautiful Victorians that had boards on the windows, and there were almost no businesses. We had this really cool commercial corridor, but there was almost nothing there. And the community was very active, the community association. And the one thing that everybody at these community meetings would say they wanted, well, there were 3 things: a grocery store, a pharmacy, and a hardware store. And by the time I got laid off that third time, I was like, this is it. I want to start my own business. We had a grocery store and we had a pharmacy. And I was like, well, I guess I better open a hardware store. And I did. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but I thought to myself, why can't I open a hardware store? Who says that just because I don't have any experience in with tools or business, let's be honest, why can't I do it? And so I did. I sent emails out. There are no hardware franchises in the United States, only cooperatives or wholesalers. And so I sent emails out to some of the cooperatives, and Ace Hardware responded. And long story short, I became a member of the Ace Hardware Cooperative.
Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thanks. It was tough.
So man, getting fired 3 times though. Tell us a little more about that and what that felt like.
Yeah. So, at that time, and you might have experienced some of this, but at that time, anybody who thought they had a tech idea could start a company. And so many people were getting funding to do that. But the funding was always tenuous and it was never enough. And there were, just tons of, a lot of ideas before their time, to be honest. The third company that I worked for that I got laid off from never had enough money. It had a very small team. And we were trying to do fingerprint technology for security. So you could walk up to your front door and use your fingerprint to get in. That doesn't seem weird to us anymore, right? I mean, all of that We get onto our phones every day, our computers every day, using our thumb or our fingerprint. Well,
Right.
this was 1999-ish, 2000, I guess. And it was way before its time. And the founders of that company, honestly, really didn't know what they were doing. And there were about 6 of us, and I didn't know what, I mean, I didn't know anything at the time. I guess I was 29 when I started working there. And so it was tough, but it was happening to a lot of people. A lot of my friends in the technology space were having the same kinds of layoffs and challenges. So I wasn't unique. I was unique in the fact that I said, no more, I'm done. I don't want to figure this tech thing out. I wasn't willing to ride the wave until I hit a company that was going to be successful. And so that was it for me.
So when you made that decision, because it's so important to me to make a decision and stick with it, where did you go from there? How did you know that the hardware business was going to be that move?
Well, I really liked the practicality of it, which is a little funny in hindsight. But, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and my dad took care of everything himself and actually worked at the local hardware store when I was 16. And so I had experienced this multi-generational family style kind of business that was very embedded in the community. And I have always really liked everything community related. Main streets, local stores, community associations, businesses, like all of those things always resonated with me. Because even in big cities, every community in a big city is like a small town. So Logan Circle and DuPont Circle and Capitol Hill and Georgetown, all these neighborhoods in DC, all wanted the same thing. We wanted safe spaces for our residents. We wanted clean streets. We wanted businesses that we could support, that supported us. And I had moved to this community that we just didn't have any businesses. And so when the people in my neighborhood started saying, we really need a hardware store. And look at all of us were pulling the boards off the windows. All of us were painting our walls and fixing our kitchens. We needed a place to buy this kind of stuff. I just thought, why couldn't I do it? And it felt very tangible and practical for me after working for something as fluffy and as a technology company.
So
Okay.
I'm curious though, like at what point did you go from working for someone else in the technology world to saying, you know what, fuck it, I want to be an entrepreneur now. Like
Well,
I'm gonna go do this myself.
I always wanted to own my own business. Like that
Okay.
part I know, but I never took the time to figure out what I should do. I just kept, when I give a keynote, I say I hitched my star to someone else's wagon and the damn wagons crashed. So I kept following these founders who were getting money, who were doing their own startups without taking the time to think about what I could really do. And then, sometimes necessity is the greatest motivator. The day that I got laid off, I hated that commute, Joe. I had like an hour to an hour and a half commute from Rockville, Maryland to my house in Logan Circle. It was only 14 miles. I think it was 14. It took me it was forever. And so that long commute home, I'm thinking, well, now what the hell am I going to do? And I had a new husband. How am I going to tell Mark that I got laid off again? And is he, what am I going to do to keep myself busy? He always jokes he didn't care that I didn't have a job, but he cared that I wasn't busy because apparently I'm annoying when I'm not busy. So I had a long time to think about it. And I like to think that in that hour and a half, I realized that's it. I'm starting my own business. Now, what the heck do I have to do it? And I took some steps to figuring it out. I mean, I asked my neighbors what we needed. I went to there are these great sales organizations around the country for franchises. And let's just say you owned one, and I would call you and I would say, this is my skill set. These are the things that I like to do. Maybe you would ask, like, what does your neighborhood need? And then based on the franchises in your database, you spit out who I should talk to as a franchise. Well, it just so happens that the company that I called to do this exercise didn't represent a hardware store because I didn't know at the time there were no hardware franchises. So I had already decided my neighborhood really needed a hardware store, but this consulting company couldn't serve me up one, which was just another step in the road for me realizing that joining a cooperative was the way to go. I had solidified at this point. I had to figure out how to articulate what my skills were and what I wanted to do because I had to talk to this franchise company. So I feel like I'm babbling a little bit, but I eliminated some things based on conversations with them. I added some interest based on conversations with my neighbors. And I was living it because I was living in this neighborhood myself. I would walk to the metro and I would pass trash on the streets and I would see all these empty storefronts. And so it eventually just all came together.
It's amazing when it all comes together like that. When you're living in a purpose of yours, it's just what a phenomenal feeling that is, and the aha moment.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, but before the aha moment, or maybe after the aha moment, you tell me. But there was challenges along the way in building this success that you had. What was some of those challenges that you had with going from, because listen, you had one of the key components of entrepreneurship, right? Learning that failure becomes part of success because you got fired 3 times.
Yeah.
So, right, I mean, you have to know that to be an entrepreneur, and have to be able to experience that. So, but
Right.
what was some of the challenges that you had when you were starting this up?
So I think there are three main ones. And again, it's funny because when I tell my origin story, and my team always makes fun of me because I always say everything was rosy. And my husband will say, Gina, it was not, we didn't make any money the first year. You were stressed out. Like, what world are you remembering? I'm gonna remember because I used to doing it. But here, three things really that were challenging for me. First, the Ace Hardware Cooperative is amazing. I think the cooperative business structure is phenomenal, but they did not understand urban hardware stores, and they were scared to death. They
Mm,
also did not have any track record of having any women opening hardware stores. And so I was initially probably not going to be approved to join the cooperative, which makes me really like sick, to be honest, when I think about it, because
mm,
none of this story could have happened. But they sent a guy to talk to me, like a new business guy, who was supposed to make sure that I had money in the bank and business experience, and that the neighborhood I picked was great.
yeah.
Well, I didn't have any money because I kept getting laid off. My business experience was with failing businesses or nonprofits. And I had picked a neighborhood that looked like, aborted that mess.
Mm.
So that was a big challenge to overcome. The second big challenge, once I overcame that, was how to get funding. I was doing this as a single, no, not a, I was married, but I was doing this as a woman. Like, Mark was not joining me in the business, which in 1999, 2000 was still challenging for a woman to get a loan. I had collateral, and that I owned a condo, and then Mark and I owned a house together once we got married. But I ended up going the SBA route, which worked out perfectly in our favor, but it was a lot of hoops. I mean, it took months to get that loan and get approval. I had to take Mark to the meetings. Like, he had to take off work so he could, I always say, so he could accompany his little wife to the bank meetings. I mean, it was irritating. So that was the second one. And then the third one, this is the one I laugh about the most. Our stores have 25,000 items. Who the hell knows what two of those things do, much less 25,000. So in addition to just really figuring out how to run a business, I had to figure out how to use some of the stuff I was selling.
Mm.
So those were my big ones. I can't get any bigger than that.
No, I mean, you mentioned some pretty big ones there, and one that I heard that really stands out is, no women were doing what you're doing, and that probably was something that you faced on a daily basis, and something that had to be overcome. What did that look like? What was that challenge like?
Well, the further down the road, and this was great actually. So there are a lot of women in hardware. There are a lot of representation in our vendors, which is getting bigger. It was smaller then. There are a lot of husband and wife teams or father-daughter teams
Mm,
because it is a multi-generational business. So Mark eventually joined me in the business, and so we became business partners. But we were like the orphans because we didn't inherit the business from our dad or our
yeah.
grandfather. So I wouldn't say that was a ding against us at all. I don't mean that, but we were kind of the weird ones. But a lot of times, the husband and wife team or the dad and daughter team, the real visible person in that team was the man. And this is just reality. I'm not, bashing any one gender. So I started looking for the wives. I started looking for the business partners that were the female part of the equation that just weren't really being represented in any of the numbers. Like,
Mm.
oh, we have 1,000 owners, 99.8 of them are men. Well, that's not true because your wife works in the business with you. So she's
Wow.
an owner too. And so in 2011, I helped ACE start the Women in Retail group, which was really validating because then I could go to a trade show and see all of these co-owners and managers and marketing managers and really cool women who were in this industry who just previously hadn't really been visible. So for me, when I started, I was immediately put in a group with the younger retailers, which was really the next generation coming in. So that was great because I met my peers, my age group peers across the country. And then we built on that. Okay, who are the women who I also can interact with and get a different perspective from? And that was really helpful.
Wow, that's powerful. So you kind of changed the game there by being the voice and the advocate for the women in that
Yeah.
on that side.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough in 2007 to be asked to join the Ace Hardware Board of Directors. So I was the youngest person ever to join the board and the third ever female. And at the time, so Ace just turned 100, which is fantastic. I think at the time when I joined, let's see, we were 93. Yeah, my math is so bad. Maybe we were 93 years old. So I was the third woman in basically 90 or 93 years. And so I had to really forge that path because it hadn't been, no one had really taken that mantle, and I wanted to make the industry as diverse as possible, as gender affirming as possible, because there's lots of great jobs in the hardware world. So yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. And man, I mean, you always have since I met you, it's always been like a humble approach towards what you've accomplished, and that's one of the things I've always loved about you. But I want you to be a little braggadocious right now because you deserve it. And how many hardware stores did you end up opening over that time frame that you were CEO and founder of Aces Hardware stores?
This is my favorite question. Well, I have a lot of favorite questions, but this is one of my favorite because you talk about forging ahead, right?
Right.
Coming out of adversity. We have over the years purchased 5 stores from sellers that were selling, and we've built 10. Well, I currently own 13. 2 of my stores failed. And so when people say, "Well, I tried that, I'm not going to try again," and you might coach people that do this. They say, "We tried that, it didn't work." Well, my 5th store is our first store that failed. And so if I had said, well, I'm not going to open another hardware store because I built one that failed, I wouldn't have opened any more after number 5.
Mm.
And at that point, so when we had to close 5, let's say we hadn't grown from there, I would have had 4 stores. One of them in Baltimore, 3 in DC. Our total headcount and teammates probably would have been, let's see, 20, maybe 45, maybe 50. Right now we have closer to 300. Our revenue would have been about 14 million. Last year we hit 50 million, and we would only be in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore City. Had we said, nah, we tried that, we're not going to try again. So that's what we ultimately built, which is really, really cool to be able to talk about.
It's awesome, and I mean, like I said, you're always humbling about it. So hearing you brag about it, I love it because you deserve it, girl.
I did
That
this
is awesome.
LinkedIn post recently, and I said something in the LinkedIn post about reaching a 10 million in revenue or 50 million. Sorry, I hope that's what I said, 50 million in revenue. And I never say that number. We talk about numbers all the time, so I'm not
Uh-huh.
ashamed of it. I think all of us should be more transparent. I think it does a lot of good for businesses in general. But I never said, "Oh yeah, we're a $50 million company." People came out of the woodwork to ask me questions or congratulate me, and I was like, "Wow, is that all I had to say?" So now I feel like I'm bragging all the time because I'm like, "Oh yeah, I just toss it around like it's no big deal." I mean, we fought tooth and nail for every bit of that revenue, and we still do, honestly. I mean, we have a lot of competition, and so it's very hard fought. But yeah, I'm like, "Oh yeah."
Hey, listen, it's definitely something to be proud about, and it brings me to a question like, so what? Because you spoke about after the 4th store, that 5th one failed, and you
Yeah.
could have easily said, you know what, that's enough. I have, 15 mil here. I don't need to move forward to go to, you didn't know what the 50 was going to look like, but what kept you going? What made you not stop? Where did that resilience come from?
So I think there are a couple things. I am super passionate about people. In fact, I mean, I have so many funny stories of. I have one of my favorite stories is a gentleman who was a former drug dealer, who sat me down one day and he said, "You are no longer allowed to hire people." And I said, well, he'd been working with me for 11 years, and so he was my mentor in a lot of ways. And he said, "Because you hire everybody." Which, when you put it all in the context, is pretty damn funny. But I really wanted to offer more jobs. I wanted to be involved in more communities. I mean, when we opened, when I opened the first store, it was 2003. And we waited 2 years before we opened the second one. And then we opened one a year for 10 years. And so it was like, for a small company like ours, that was really rapid. And people were calling us from other neighborhoods saying, will you open in our neighborhood? People were coming down from Baltimore, will you open in our neighborhood? Because both DC and Baltimore had over 600,000 people at the time. And like Baltimore had two hardware stores, no big boxes, two tiny hardware stores for 600,000 people. And when we opened in 2003, I think DC had like five. So the market was wide open with a really hungry population for our services and our products. So I didn't want to give up at that fifth one because there were still neighborhoods asking and there were still people to be hired. And so we were also growing our future leaders. And if I didn't have a place to promote them to, they were going to be stuck either in the positions they were hired into, or I was going to lose them to other retailers that had bigger jobs.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like you had a love for the community to keep growing and giving back to the community that gave to you so much.
Yeah, I mean you hit the nail on the head. Seriously, like we had I told you at the beginning of the show how I joked that everything was perfect the first year. I always say there was a line around the block. No line around the block, but
Right.
that community was so supportive. I mean, in fact, last year was our 20th anniversary. And we had a party with 20 of our original customers who still shop with us. Now there's more than 20, but those 20, I mean, in some cases have become friends. They've become advocates. They've been our PR machine. And it was really, really cool to sit around the table with those people and remember what Logan Circle looked like and what it looks like now. And how, they were there when we decided we were going to open the second one and told their friends across town. And it really is all about community.
Yeah, I mean, community is powerful, and it's a way of growth and success.
Yeah,
And man, when the community gives to you, you got to give it back, man. It's just that's the way it's supposed to be.
you're so
So
right.
so going through these challenges to open up, to go from 4 to 15, from 0 to 4. I mean, there's challenges across the board, right? What were some roadblocks and limited beliefs that you had to crack through in order to get there? Because man, I'm sure those limited beliefs were heavy through that growing process.
There's so many. When you don't know what you don't know, you don't know anything. And
Mm.
like I said, I didn't know how to use the products. I had never run a business before. I was It's funny. I always think of myself as younger. I was 33 when we opened, no, 32 when we opened the first location. And that's not young, but I was so inexperienced and naive that I really feel like it was mounted on love, and it just got me to where it was actually functioning. Um, but I have realized over the years, and we said it when we were going from 1 to 2, there was a gentleman that said to me, he was a retailer, and he said, never open more than one location. And I said, why? And he said, you can't be in two places at once. And
Wow.
when I say this on stage, I always want the whole audience to go, duh, because you can't, right? I mean, it's physically impossible. But what he was saying to me truly was that he didn't trust anybody to help him expand. And so if you don't trust the team that you've hired, you've either hired the wrong team, you have the wrong policies and procedures, or you're the wrong person to do this job if you want to grow. And I had huge appetites for growth, especially because people were asking us to open in their neighborhoods. And so one of the things that we did when we went from 1 to 2, we promoted someone from that first store. And then I said, who's the adult in the room that's going to come help me? Which is kind of funny when you think about it. Like I was an adult, but I was like, somebody, there is an adult who's going to like swoop in and save me. And what that really made me realize is that this country is full of incredible business coaches. And I needed a business coach who was going to help me figure out how to sort of formalize what we were doing so I could package it like a franchise in a lot of ways and ship it across town. So we hired the first business coach that we worked with, and we've hired four over the 20 years, I guess. Linda. And Linda helped us define our core values and then define our negotiables, non-negotiables, essentially, like how we were going to make those core values, how we were going to have them feed into how we operated. So, for example, here just to make it make sense, maybe one of our core values is be a good neighbor. Well, if I was interviewing you and I hired a 14-year-old once. I love talking about Eddie because Eddie had never had a job or a boss or a paycheck. I didn't even know if I could hire a 14-year-old, and he thought I had 7 heads. He was so afraid of me. I'm like the nicest person ever, but he was so afraid of me. But he came in to interview with a man from a local nonprofit agency who was helping teenagers get jobs. And every time I would ask Eddie a question, the man would answer, the mentor would answer because Eddie was so afraid to talk. And I was like, I am going to hire this damn kid. I just have to get him to talk. I mean, I'd already decided I was going to, be helpful. And so I said, tell me about a time you were a good neighbor, which is one of our core values. And I asked the mentor, I'd given up talking to Eddie at this point. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Eddie like light up, Joe. Like he got this big smile on his face. He sat up straighter because he had a neighbor that he helped. So he was able to tell me about helping that neighbor. And it was like those core values and all of that work we did with that business coach completely came to life. It all made sense. And I am so sorry because I'm really babbling, but I just, that process from 1 to 2 was tough, but we hired an adult who could help us do it. And we documented shit and we took it across town.
That's awesome. So it sounds like realizing that the from 1 to 2 made the 2 to 14, 15 a lot easier, and realizing that it's like the old saying of, it takes the same mindset I mean, it takes the same energy to make 100 grand that it does to make 1 million, to make 5 million. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing when it comes to opening up those stores and really removing that sounds like a little bit of a limited belief of lack, right? Coming from a lack,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Yeah.
and what did those core value, what other core values were uncovered through that process?
So, always grow and share is probably, well, I wouldn't say it's my favorite. Always grow and share is one of my favorites because every single day we have to learn something at that store. And everybody that we hired, like I didn't know how to use anything. So it was very easy for me to hire a 14-year-old who also didn't know how to use anything because we were going to learn together. And so always grow and share was really important because you're going to walk in as a new teammate and you're going to learn something every dang day. You should. If you're not, then there's another problem, right? Then we want you to tell the other person who's working in the aisle next to you or who's working at the cash register. And so that one became a big deal too. Be nice.
Mhm.
Be nice is kind of a basic. So there's no such thing as common sense. And one of our core values, let me back up a second. One of our core values is communicate respectfully. Nobody
Yes.
understands what that means. What does communicate respectfully mean? Do you know your audience? Can we curse when we're doing this? Should you yell at your coworker on the store floor when you're No, you should not yell at your coworker. But if everybody in your house yells at you all day long, you think that's communicating,
Mhm.
respectfully or otherwise, right? And so we realized that communicating respectfully was not common among our team. So we had to teach that if we were going to make it a core value. And I think by adding be nice as a core value, people know what nice is. I mean, they get it. I think most people get it. And so you can bring anything you're trying to do in, if you can sort of hold it with this idea of let's just be nice, which also requires a lot of patience. I think you can get to where you want to go better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, treating people with respect is important, and it takes you far, especially in being of service and having a business. You mentioned something that I think is really important. Hiring a coach and having a coach help you grow your business. I believe, man, shit, everybody should have a coach. I mean, even the best coaches have a coach. I have like 5 coaches. So how important was that process for you to be able to have a coach to take you from where you were to where you wanted to be?
Well, super important. I think now, though, 22 years later, I realize the importance in a greater way. So the fourth coach that we hired in 2020 or 2021. We were getting ready to plan our exit strategy or really define it and start our exit strategy. And so we wanted to hire a coach that could help me through that process and my team through that process. So now looking back on it, somehow we managed to get it right. But I really did we made a point to interview who we were hiring for that job in a much bigger and better way, I think, than we did in the past, because there are so many great coaches and each one might fit a different niche or fill a different need that you have. And I specifically, in this case, wanted someone who had either gone through a family business transaction or had worked with other families transitioning in the past, because I just wanted them to have that knowledge as a business coach. And so I interviewed a lot of people to get to someone who intimately understood the emotions involved in that, the finances involved, the transparency involved in that, so that we were all talking the same language.
That's so important to make sure everything's aligned, right? It all aligns with the core values, and when that happens, then you are speaking that same language.
Yeah. Yeah. We also, in that particular process, we did the Hogan assessment. I'm not sure with your clients if you do any particular assessments like that. So think Myers-Briggs, but on steroids, if people don't know what Hogan is. And that was also very important because I was leaving the business I founded and I was leaving it as the CEO. So that was leaving a CEO gap. Like, I will never pretend that, oh, she's the founder, she's all that. But the CEO is pretty important. I mean, I surrounded myself with people much smarter who were really doing all of the work, but I couldn't just walk away. At least I couldn't just comfortably walk away. And so Josh, our coach, walked us through the Hogan assessment so we could figure out what skill set I might have that the rest of my team didn't or needed. And so when we were hiring our incoming CEO, the person that I really wanted to take the job, and he fortunately, he fit the bill, I had him take that assessment, because if he wasn't going to possess the skill set that my team was going to lack when I left, he wasn't going to be a good fit for the team.
Yeah. Man, you mentioned something that's so important, and I hope everybody out there is paying attention to this because I think it's vital. And you said that you surrounded yourself with other people who were smarter than you, helped you grow. How important is that and was that to the process of growing and taking your business to the next level, to be able to say, you know what? Shit, man, I don't want to do this part. This is not what I'm best at. So let me delegate this responsibility to someone else who knows this part of the business better than I do.
Yeah. Or who has the aptitude to learn it, right?
Yeah.
So our inventory manager, corporate inventory manager, started out as a sales associate in our plumbing department. And, he'll joke that he has some OCD tendencies, but he really liked inventory. I cannot handle or stand the tedium that is involved with counting, with documenting in spreadsheets, like none of that stuff.
Right.
But it was vital to my business that we had that skill set. And so I would say hiring the right people and feeling surrounded by people who were going to support the company was super important when we went from 1 to 2. We started seeing it happen in the initial location. But honestly, I don't think I was smart enough to realize that was going on. But when we hired, my husband's Mark, but this gentleman's name is Mark too. When we hired Mark and he just sort of slotted himself into that position, we kind of watched him grow into it and then realized, oh, if we're going to be in 2 places, we need somebody doing this twice. So we need somebody who knows it, who can train the next person. And, I say it now and I feel like, oh, doesn't everybody know this? And not everybody does. But at the time, and we lucked into some of it. And then we also really trusted the people that we hired. And we trusted them. Here's a great example. The first manager that went to manage the second store was a cashier in our first store. So Jen Ward is her name. Jen had, in fact, I think she works for LinkedIn now in California. Jen had never managed anything. She'd never worked for a business like ours, but she wanted a side hustle. And so she came in one day and she said, "Do you need any cashiers?" And I was like, no, I think we're full. We have all the people we need. And the day before we were going to open, I panicked. I realized we didn't have nearly enough people. And I looked down, Joe. It was a sign from the universe. I looked down and there was a trash pile at my feet. And in that trash pile was her phone number. I had no idea how to get in touch with her. There was Jen Ward's phone number. And I called her and she started the very next day and she worked with us for almost 11 years before she left. And she left, like she moved to California. It wasn't like, oh, I don't like this business anymore. But Jen embodied our values. She was nice, communicated respectfully. She asked a lot of questions. She wanted to learn. So she was super curious about the products and the people. And when we said, would you be interested in managing the second store? She jumped at the chance. But like me, she didn't know how to run a hardware store. I mean, she had watched us at this point for 2 years in a temporary, a part-time basis because she didn't work that many hours. But it was so important for us to have people that understood those core values and lived them and was trustworthy so we could send them across town. This is the honest to God truth. Our second store is 2 miles from the first, but it takes like an hour to get there on public transportation, and I don't drive. And I was like, no way in hell am I taking a bus for an hour every day to work at that store. It was like this really hilarious necessity to save my commute. I mean, I could have walked probably faster than I could have taken the bus, but Jen was like, I'll move to that neighborhood to run that store. And that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You spoke about trust. You spoke about the universe and being able to trust how the universe puts certain people in our lives is also a part of it, right? And that person, Jen, was put into your life to be able to help your business grow and take it to that next level. Universe knows what it's doing.
Oh, when I look down that trash pile, I'm not lying. I still get chills when I think about it. Jen lived in the big apartment building behind the store. And so I had thought, well, maybe I'll just go knock on it was like 400 people or some units in that building. I'm like, I'm just going to go knock on every door and be like, hey, does Jen live here? I didn't have time to do that. And there was her number in the trash. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. That is awesome. So, all right, you mentioned earlier also about finding a new CEO and you sold some of these businesses. Tell us what that process looked like and how that led to where you are now, and let us know what it is you're doing now also.
Yeah, so just a couple things as a lead up. In 2014, the inventory coordinator, Mark, who I told you about, came to me and he said, this community is calling us, and the community meaning Logan Circle, is calling us Recovery Hardware. And I cried. In fact, I'm writing a newsletter right now, and we have an unofficial motto, which there are no tears in hardware. My husband was not going to let me cry if I was stressed out at the hardware store. But Mark Wasson said, this community is calling us Recovery Hardware because we had hired so many people from the local drug and alcohol recovery community. I'm not going to say it was on accident, but it was never a formal program. And so that led to me writing a book, which led to me talking about how every employer can do what we're doing, which then led to me deciding, I think it's time for me to move on from being CEO of this business. I think I had reached my curiosity to build it, but I wanted it to be built. So I wanted to bring somebody else in who was going to take it to that next level that I always joke, I didn't sign up as a lifer because people are like, how could you quit your baby? Because there's so many other things that I want to do. And so it's a long road to a little house. In 2021, the protests in DC started in front of my store. And, the riots had started and happened in front of my store before the store was there, but on that main street corridor that runs through Logan Circle. But when the protests started happening, we were there. And I could see the marchers going down the street in front of my office. And my team would tease me that I was going to fall out the window because I would open my window and I would have signs and whistle, like all in solidarity of everything that the marchers were asking for: generational wealth building, gender equality, racial equality, pay, like all of that stuff. And one day my husband said, I think we can sell it to our team. I think we can figure out how to put the ownership back into the people that helped us build it. And our team is the United Nations. We are gay and straight and black and brown and male and female and every color of the rainbow in a way that I think our customers appreciate because they're coming in and they want to be reflected in who's helping them. And so Mark said, let's figure out how to sell it to the team, which really led us to figure out what our succession plan was going to be. And so we started evaluating, we evaluated all the options first, selling to a private buyer, selling to private equity, closing. I mean, some hardware store owners just lock the door and close. We certainly weren't going to do that, but we put it on the list. Selling to another ACE retailer. And then we stumbled onto, almost by accident, actually, an employee stock ownership program, an ESOP, which allows a business to sell their company to their employees without the employees paying any money. And there's huge tax advantages for us as the seller, for the company that stays an ESOP or becomes an ESOP, and for the employees who are now employee owners. And once we understood that, man, we were off and running. That was it. My husband's our CFO, so he'll say it was really hard and I'm making it sound super easy. But we had a plan and we did it.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way. That's awesome. I mean,
Pretty cool.
Having a plan and making sure that plan is executed that's the way it gets done, people. You got to have a plan, put that plan together and, make those targets. So,
Yeah.
and you also were able to give back to the community again, which is great.
Well, I mean, the community's not going to lose their hardware store.
Yeah.
None of the 13 communities where we are. So, yeah.
So you mentioned this book, Recovery Hardware. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that's a pride and joy of yours. I don't want to go without you talking about that a little bit.
I just get this big smile on my face.
Huge.
I'm sure you have some listeners who have written books or who want to write books, and it is a serious labor of love. There's a quote taped to my desk in the other room that says 1,000 shitty first drafts, because you will write and you will write again and you will write again. I remember there was two chapters that I sent to my editor and I said, you will not touch one exclamation point. Like they were my sacred babies, right? She's like, I'm not going to tell you these chapters suck, but I'm going to tell you they could be better. I wanted to tell the stories of the teammates who had helped us build the business. And so everything aligned really well. I mean, this was, it started with why and how I think I have an entrepreneurial spirit, but what it quickly morphed into was how I build a business, hiring adults, having the core values, hiring people from the community, promoting people from the community. It was really, really fun to write.
That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, I know it's a pride and joy of yours. And can you tell us a little bit about what the book's about so everybody knows that also?
Yeah, I mean,
where to find it?
It's a little bit, it's definitely nonfiction. It's part memoir, part entrepreneurial journey. People who want to, and I've had so many great testimonials and feedback about it that you can take a lot of things from it. If you're in recovery, for example, you might just feel hope. If you're a business owner who wants to broaden who and how they're hiring, you're going to get some ideas. If you are a woman who's trying to make it in a male-dominated industry, you're going to get some ideas. And so for me, it was, this is how we went from 1 to 2 to 5 to 15 with so much help along the way. So it answers a lot of those questions for me. And it also just celebrates some folks in my life who I like to call a lot of my teammates my non-traditional teachers, because they never had a formal teaching education. They never went to school to become a professor or, an elementary school teacher. But these are the people over the last 22 years who really taught me how to be a real human, like a really nice human being. And so that's really what the book is about. It's celebrating some of those stories.
Right. Wow. And also what makes you a great leader, Gina. I think you got to give yourself credit for that, because you are a phenomenal leader with these people that have followed your lead all these years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope so.
So tell us what you're doing now, who you're helping, who you're serving, the problem you're solving, and, where everybody can find you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I assume you have some show notes. I'm most active on LinkedIn at Schaefer. I do have I post on Instagram a lot, but it tends to be like where I am in the world and fun people that I'm meeting. And so that's Gina Schaefer, DC. I stepped down 2 years ago as CEO. I immediately launched or jumped into a public speaking course where you and I met. So that was
Yes.
a pivotal point and it came at a very good time. I mean, I knew that when I left my role, I was going to have a huge void, and that void was going to be very emotional for me, and I needed to figure out how to fill it. I had to do a lot of reflecting. I had to really think about what I wanted my next footprint to look like. I knew I wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. And so I took that public speaking course and made some amazing new friends, connections, and then started just talking about our story. I had an opportunity to do, I guess, right prior to that point, to do a book tour for Recovery Hardware,
Mhm.
which made me realize that a lot of the stories were resonating with people in a variety of ways. And so I wanted to do more of that. And so I am actively looking for places to speak. I still talk about the book if somebody wants to talk about the book. I'm dabbling in some just educational opportunities for me, learning French, learning how to be an angel investor. I mean, taking crafting classes. There's a lot of weird that I do very thoughtfully. I know that makes it kind of sound like I'm all over the place, but they all really kind of tie in. And I still try to really keep the focus local. So anything that I'm doing philanthropically, I do on a very local basis,
Mm.
which I really appreciate.
Yeah. There goes that giving back spirit. I love it. So important. Shout out to Cohort 20, man. We were the
Yeah.
best in that public speaking course, right?
Yeah.
So Gina, a couple questions that I ask every guest. The first is going to be, and yeah, everybody, you can find Gina's information in the show notes, by the way. But the first is, what does the word purpose mean to you?
Oh. I used to say that I had a chip on my shoulder that got me up every single morning because my purpose in life was to make sure that my team stayed employed, healthy, and growing. And
Mm.
that meant that I had to outrun and outsmart the competition that was always bigger, stronger, better funded than me. So purpose is intentionality when you wake up every morning and consistency with what that intentionality was. I mean, for 22 years, that was my intention, that was my purpose.
Attention is so important. And man, when you could wake up without using that alarm clock in the morning, that's purpose for sure, all day.
Oh,
Uh, Purpose gives you no other option but to wake up. He says, "Get your ass out of bed. It's time to go walk and live in that purpose."
I mean, even if that purpose was scaring the hell out of me, I was going to get up and go face it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, things aren't all like that, but yeah.
And then what does the word reforge mean to you?
Hmm. So, well, your audience should know you haven't asked me this question in advance, so I don't have like a canned answer for either one of them. But it's remake, truly. I mean, I
Yeah.
was involved in nonprofits and then moved to Brazil, oddly. I mean, I taught English and had a great time, but then I came back and got a tech job. I didn't know, my first tech boss had to teach me how to turn on my computer. But that's reforging. That's believing that I can do something new and different. And then I decided I was going to open this crazy hardware store. I mean, what the heck kind of idea is that? And so, it's a lot like pivot to me. You can rebrand, remake, re-engage your life any single moment if you're willing to look for those opportunities or be open to them. Um, so that's probably what it means to me.
Oh, that's awesome. Remake is because you could always recreate what you want your destiny to be. You have control of what that looks like.
Yeah,
And
and can I
this
just add something? Actually, what I've realized over the years is that if you want to do something new, if you want to remake yourself or change, pivot, reforge, you have to tell everybody that you talk to what you want to do
Mm.
because nobody knows what's going on inside of your head. Nobody knows how they can help you unless you tell them what kind of help you want. So if I want to do something new, I say to people, hey, this is what I want to do. I told 1,000 people last year I wanted to give an international speech, and damn it, I'm doing it in April. And I really think it's because I consciously made the effort to let people know what kinds of things I was interested in. And I think that the flip side is we always have to be willing to ask people, what can I do to help you? What are you looking for that I can do? You might not always be able to help, but I believe that we should be asking all the time, hey, Joe, you and I had a conversation earlier. I don't know if it was helpful, but that was me hopefully offering some suggestions or some ideas or just a sounding board. And a lot of people need that. I know.
Yeah, that's definitely powerful. And for everybody listening out there, that's a jewel right there. For the people who are looking to reforge their life, ask people around how you could be of service to them, and see what kind of change that could make, because that's how you create impact out there also. Man,
Yeah.
Gina, this has been awesome to have you on as a guest. I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your strength, your story, and helping everybody out there who could learn from that.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for listening out there. Thank you for watching on YouTube and all the other channels we're out there on. And I want everybody to have a productive, profitable rest of the week. Stay blessed. Don't forget to share and like the episode, and people out there that could be impacted by hearing this. Enjoy.
You've been listening to Reforge Your Life with your host, Joe Rivera. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Joe Rivera and how he can help you or your organization reforge your life and regain your place at the top, head on over to withjoerivera.com and follow Joe on all social platforms. The Reforge Your Life podcast was produced by Thrive Loud Productions. Thanks for listening.